Can you hear me? Great.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you.
It sounds very windy somewhere.
Somebody's out taking a walk. That's nice.
Can everybody see the presentation? Okay, sweet. We'll give it a couple minutes.
Makes it kind of long, but yeah.
Use your razor.
Yeah. If you all wouldn't mind just muting until we get started, that would be great. I don't want to accidentally have a bunch of people here. What's going on? We'll just give it a few more minutes for more people to join. Thanks. All right, I think we can get started. So if the fellow UW-FMR presenters wouldn't mind just turning on your video, and then just at least for the beginning, if everybody else wants to just turn off their video, that way if you have it set on the like hide non-video participants thing, then you can just see everyone while we're doing introductions from our program. And then later on, feel free to, if you're going to ask a question or whatever, feel free to turn on your video then. So welcome to our second First Look session via Zoom, which the theme of today's session is care of under-resourced patients in both rural and urban settings. And we're going to go through a bunch of the same information we went through at the first Zoom session because we don't expect people to attend more than one of these. But then we'll also have some specific information about that topic as well that we didn't talk about last time. All right, so welcome. This is all of the residents and fellows, and this is the slide to remind me to have everybody go around and introduce themselves. So first, I am Zoe. I am the chief resident. We have a 4th-year chief at our program, which we're super lucky to have. So none of the R3s have to do it, which is great. I just graduated from our program in June, and this year I'm doing chief and doing outpatient family medicine. So Joey and Claire, do you want to go next?
I'm Claire. I am one of the 2nd-year residents at the Harborview site.
And I'm Joey. I'm also one of the 2nd-year residents out of Harborview. I'm Native American from the Yakima tribe, so it's a pleasure to see everybody here today.
Ying?
Hi everyone, I'm Ying Zhang and former resident of our program and also faculty now with my primary clinic at Harborview. It's great to see everyone.
Christine?
Hi everyone, I'm Christine Davenport. I'm one of the 2nd-year residents in our rural training track out in Chelan. Thanks for joining us all today.
Dave? Oh, can't hear you. Can other people hear Dave? I think your headphones are messing up. Sorry. Jess, do you want to go while we're figuring that out?
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica. I'm one of the 3rd-year family medicine residents. I'm part of the Northgate Clinic. Welcome.
Carrie?
Hi everyone, I'm Carrie Bergeson. I'm the site director at our rural training track in Chelan.
Goldie?
Hello everyone, good to see you all. I'm one of the, my name's Goldie, I'm one of the 2nd-year Northgate residents.
Awesome. And do we want to try Dave again?
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh,
Sorry.
perfect. You sound great.
I think my my earbuds bit the dust this morning, so sorry. Anyway, I'm Dave Evans. I'm the program director. Good afternoon, everybody. My clinic is at Northgate, and yeah, just happy to be here with you all.
Yay. So we're just going to start with a land acknowledgement. Ying, if you want to take this.
Yeah. So before we begin today, we just wanted to acknowledge that for those of us in Seattle, we are sitting on traditional land of the Coastal Salish, which includes the Duwamish people, past and present. And for those of our colleagues in the rural training track out in Chelan, they're tuning in from Chelan, Washington, which is traditional land of the Chelan and the Wenatchee tribes, which are part of the larger Yakima Nation. We do this acknowledgement to honor with gratitude this land and also the indigenous people and cultures that have contributed significantly to the history of our nation.
Thank you so much, Ying. So just a couple of ground rules. I already mentioned this, but if you're not talking, just keep your video off so we can save the bandwidth for the people who are talking. Please stay muted if you're not talking. And then please put your questions in the chat if they come up during the session. And then during the Q&A, you're welcome to keep adding questions to the chat, or you're also welcome to ask questions live if you want to unmute yourself. That's totally fine too. And if you want to rename yourself to include your school, that would be great. That way we just can see how many different places people are coming from, which is always exciting. Okay, great. So our agenda for today is going to be a general overview, followed by our topic of the day, which is care for under-resourced patients, and then a Q&A. So Dave is going to start us off with some nuts and bolts of our program.
Great. Thank you, Zoe. So I would like to start just by saying thank you to many people, to start our residents and faculty and staff who are taking time out of their Saturday afternoon and all the work that they've done to put the slide set together and the work that they do on making our program a better place. And then particularly to you all as participants, thank you for joining us. We appreciate the effort that it takes to learn about programs, particularly in this virtual environment that I know is challenging for all of us. So thank you to everybody for being here. As Zoe said, I'm going to just do a brief overview of some of the program highlights, and then she'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty of how the curriculum works and where we work and all of those sorts of things. So I will start with this slide here that talks about our program makeup. So we have a 10-10-10 program. We are growing, or have been growing for the last couple of years with the addition of the Chelan Rural Training Track. But as we enter the next academic year, we will be fully allocated with 10-10-10, with 18 residents at Northgate, 6 residents at Harborview, and 6 residents in Chelan. We'll talk a little bit about the resources of the University of Washington and on a number of occasions during this talk. But one of the things that having those resources affords us is that we also have multiple fellowships at our program. And so we have a sports medicine fellowship that has been established for quite some time, as well as a global health fellowship, both of which we've had for a while, as well as a reproductive health advocacy fellowship, which is relatively new now in its second year. And as Zoe mentioned earlier, we have an R4 academic chief resident position that is a junior faculty position, and we're very fortunate to have that. As a large academic institution, we have many faculty with many interests, and we'll touch on that in a little bit, as well as a phenomenal staff that keeps all the wheels turning, gets the I's dotted and the T's crossed. So we're very lucky in that respect. And as a resident at the University of Washington, you are not simply one of 30 family medicine residents. You are one of 1,400, greater than 1,400 University of Washington residents and fellows. And one of the amazing things, fantastic things about having that number of people around is that, you have some bargaining power. And here at the University of Washington, you are represented by the University of Washington House Staff Association, which is a large independent union that fights for all kinds of things that residents need, whether that's changes in salary or benefits or well-being issues or whatever it may be. You are represented here. I think that that's something to pay attention to as you look at programs, and we're very happy about that. So, family medicine department is one of the larger family medicine departments in the country. It is one of the first family medicine departments in the country. In fact, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary sort of through this year and next. I mentioned before that it's it's a well-resourced place. We have multiple sections within the Department of Family Medicine. Of course, our section is the residency section, but there's also the section on medical student education. There's a research section, which is world-renowned primarily for its workforce, its health workforce work. We have a sports medicine section. The docs there take care of both elite athletes in the Huskies system and the Seahawks, as well as anybody else who has sports medicine needs. One of the things that I love about our sports medicine section is that they are family docs and they take care of the whole person, not just the bone or the joint. So they're paying attention to the mental health needs of elite athletes and such. So it's incredible there. Palliative care is part of the family medicine department. We have the Osher integrated medicine program. And then, of course, we're talking about rural medicine in part today. We have family doctors running a critical access hospital, and all of WWAMI, which is the Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, Montana, and Idaho landmass. We do encourage everybody to investigate full spectrum family medicine. Most of our faculty are outpatient, inpatient, and OB trained, and we want to expose everybody to the full range of family medicine. We have a family medicine inpatient service, which we're very proud of. That is run by our family medicine residents and attended by our family medicine faculty. We take care of sick adults, pregnant women, and newborns on that service. So we're super excited about that. In our program, we emphasize leadership, advocacy, and scholarship. These are some great pictures of our residents exercising these types of activities. We have residents who are local, regional, and national leaders. We encourage that. We try to find time and carve out time for residents to participate in these types of activities. We have a number of people active in the Washington Academy of Family Physicians. They testify in the House of Delegates and have written numerous resolutions, some of which have gone to the national AAFP. We have people sitting on national committees of the AAFP. We have one resident who is part of the AAMC's organization of resident representatives. Our residents are out there doing things, and we encourage that. All of our residents are participating in scholarship of one type or another. That does not necessarily mean research. Scholarship in our program is defined quite broadly. It could be curriculum creation or scholarship around advocacy, as well as more traditional research. So there's protected time for that scholarly work, and we're super proud of our residents for the work that they do there. Those of you who were at our last first look, or our first look, it focused on health equity and anti-racism work within the residency. And I think that our program is in what I would describe as an aspirational state here. We have a lot of work to do, but are also doing good work to move our program towards these goals, where we can be a safe place for everybody, and as anti-racist as we possibly can be. There are a couple of things that are happening here. We have a health equity and anti-racism committee, which is very active in helping us achieve these goals. There's a department-wide JEDI committee, which is Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. And this spans not just the residency, but all those other sections that we talked about earlier. We've been working hard to update our applicant selection process to make it as fair and equitable and anti-racist as possible. We have a diversity sub-I program, which this year is virtual, which has been really fun and exciting to try to create that type of outreach. We have a HERE curriculum, a health equity and anti-racism curriculum that spans all 3 years. It runs through didactics, is included in our core skills, medical home, and R3 curricula. It is a work in progress, but definitely moving in a forward direction. This year we instituted race-based caucusing, and we're off to a good start there. And then finally, at the University of Washington, we have the Network for Underrepresented Residents and Fellows. We have enjoyed a lot of resident participation over the years in this organization, and currently Joey Nelson, who you met earlier, is sitting as the vice president of that organization. We're super proud of him and all of our residents for that participation. So we're heading in the right direction, but have a long way to go, but lots of things to talk about here. All right, Zoe, I'm gonna mute and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. And like Dave said, our last session really focused on health equity and anti-racism, and so we'd be happy to share the slides from that session as well if you weren't able to make it, to just hear a little bit more about that work too. I'm going to delve into the curriculum now. So obviously it's 3 years, so we'll just go kind of one by one about the main points of the curriculum in R1, R2, and R3 year, trying to focus both on Seattle tracks, which is most of our residents, and also a little bit on the RTT. So the R1 year I could sum up as more emergent, acute, critical care, a lot of inpatient, definitely clinic. You know, you're still a lot of people, 100 people's PCP, you're still in clinic every month. You still have some outpatient work besides clinic, but it is a lot of, you know, kind of bread and butter inpatient work, as it's going to be at most programs. So in our 1 year, you have 3 months in the ED as core rotations. One of those is at the Seattle Children's ED. So you get a really wide, broad emergency training in our program. And then you have 2 months of inpatient medicine where you're off service with the medicine residents, along with many other off service residents like psychiatry, anesthesia. So you're not the only off service residents. You have 1 month with inpatient peds at Seattle Children's Hospital, a bunch of OB that is within our family medicine service, and then also OB that is separate from the family medicine service. You do some time in the ICU, and then you have 1 purely outpatient block, which is sports medicine, which is great. And then as you can see up here in the corner, if you're in the rural track, you actually have some extra outpatient time too, to kind of do some of the stuff that we do later in the residency while you're still in Seattle. So repro is a big one. So a little bit, you know, also sports med, but a little bit more. And then urology and ENT, which are things that are just necessary for the RTT residents to learn in their first year before they go to Chelan. And then also in the R1 year, there's a longitudinal curriculum involving a lot of continuity with your clinic patients and professional development and educational development. And so we have what we call a clinic development block, where right at the beginning of the year, you spend a lot of time in clinic for 2 straight weeks, so you can really get to know your clinic and get to know your patient panel before you go off to the ICU and all that other crazy stuff. And then you also will have an average of a half day of continuity clinic per week, even when you're on really intense inpatient rotations. So we make that a priority. You have 5 weeks of what we call core skills. So 2 weeks at the beginning of the year to do kind of like a boot camp where you'll learn a bunch of procedural skills, kind of refresh things from med school, get all your like ACLS done and all that kind of stuff at the beginning. And then you'll return to a kind of more didactic couple of weeks in the middle of the year as well for the rest of core skills. And so that's a time when everybody can come together during intern year. You'll have protected scholarly time, as Dave talked about, even in your R1 year. And then we have a really strong longitudinal behavioral health program, and then population health, as well as didactics, which are both kind of noon report style meetings twice a week, and then a full half day of didactics on Wednesday afternoons every week as well. Our 2 year is really a transition from that really inpatient heavy first year towards a lot more primary care and a lot more of what many of us came to residency to do, not all of us, but really focusing a little bit more on outpatient. So it's about half and half. So in your second year, you'll have a bunch of outpatient rotations. You'll have one called medical home and another called community practice selective, both of which are really focusing on getting to know your community, learning about resources in the community. One of these pictures is a few of our current R3s presenting some health education at a local community center. For example, you'll have rotations about repro and sports and cardiology, which is mixed inpatient, outpatient. And then you'll have a bunch more time in clinic, and you'll have an elective block where you can do pretty much anything you want. And we're gonna talk a lot more about that later. But then in R2, you also still have a bunch of inpatient rotations, you know, because you have to learn that too. So you're gonna start senioring on the family medicine inpatient service as a second year. So as an intern, you were the intern on the service, and as a second year, halfway through the year, you're gonna start senioring. And then you're gonna have even more dedicated OB time besides the family medicine inpatient service. So 8 more weeks of that. And then 4 weeks where you're working on a hospitalist service. So similar work to what you do on the family medicine inpatient service, but without the OB and newborn part. You'll have a surgery rotation, and then you'll do even more emergency medicine this year as well, as you will third year, as you'll see in a second. Emergency medicine is super important to family medicine, not only because most emergency rooms in the country are run by family docs, but because patients are not always the best at triaging themselves to what level of care they need. And so in the clinic, you see people who should be in the emergency room, and in the emergency room, you see people who should be in the clinic. So I really like that we have so much ER in our program. And then in third year, it's a lot of clinic, a lot of continuity, and really choose your own adventure. So there are some core rotations that are mostly outpatient: dermatology, geriatrics, pediatrics, gynecology, psychiatry, and palliative care are all really essential, really cool, intensive outpatient rotations. You'll do even more emergency at Harborview, like I talked about before. And then also, though, there's a ton of clinic time and a ton of elective time. So you're going to do over 1,000 of your continuity clinic visits during our 3 year. You're in clinic all the time. You're really, really feeling like a primary care doctor most days. You do still senior on the service and do night float, so you do have some inpatient time and OB, you know, especially delivering your own continuity deliveries from clinic. But you also have 4 months of elective time, which you can do truly anything you want. And we're going to talk a lot about different urban and rural opportunities for that later. But it's really a choose your own adventure, because that third year, you have so much time to design your own curriculum. We also have another longitudinal curriculum in the third year called R3 curriculum, very creative name, where we do things like practice management, advocacy, QI, more behavioral health, sort of like rounding out the education. And then for Chelan, R2 and R3 are obviously completely different than that, because they're not in Seattle, they're in Chelan. So many of the same kind of required rotations, of course, they're going to do. They still have to do surgery, they still have to do cardiology, but it's in a little bit of a different way. Many of them are longitudinal, and then some of them are not. So for the longitudinal curriculum, it's just a different model than in Seattle. So just like in Seattle, you have your clinic patients, you have your panel, you are people's PCP, they are your patient, which is not true at every program. However, in Chelan, there are no hospitalists. There isn't really like an inpatient versus outpatient team. And so when your patient is admitted to the hospital, you may not be on call to admit them, but then you're going to follow them while they're in the hospital, kind of like in the old model before hospitalists existed. So it's a totally different model, but really amazing learning. And then in addition to following your patients both in the outpatient and when they're in the inpatient setting and delivering them if they are pregnant, you'll also do some ER shifts. You'll do different days, different things, different days. Like sometimes you'll be with the general surgeon. And then Also, sometimes you're the person on call, so you'll take call 1 day a week and then 1 weekend per month. And then for admissions that come in, you might admit the person initially, even if they're Christine's patient, but then eventually Christine will take over because she's the primary. Yeah, RTT is the rural training track. Thanks for asking that. And then there's also tons of electives and outpatient rotations in Chelan too. Some of them can be in Chelan, and some of them, if they're more specialized, you'll go to nearby Wenatchee instead, a place where there's more specialists. But there's tons of opportunities for electives there too. All right, core rotation sites. So we at UW work at a lot of different hospitals, which I think is a very big advantage to our program. It does sometimes mean driving around a lot, but you get so much broad learning from it. And these are actual pictures taken from or of the various rotation sites that are beautiful. So the first one I'll talk about is Harborview Medical Center. So Harborview is a county hospital, but it's a really unique model because it's co-run by the county and by the university, which itself is a state institution. So lots of mission, lots of sort of public good as part of the mission. It's a safety net hospital. It focuses a lot on under-resourced patients, provides a lot of addiction treatment, both inpatient and outpatient, care for immigrants and refugees, people experiencing homelessness. It's also totally separately a level 1 trauma center and the only level 1 trauma center for 5 states. So when you're on trauma in the ER at Harborview, you are getting the most real trauma training that anyone in the country could possibly get. It is really, really intense. So it's an unbelievable, really, really unique place. And we'd be happy to talk about it more in a little bit. And just to mention, everybody works at all of these hospitals, regardless of which track you're in. So all the residents work at Harborview in the inpatient and ER setting, even if they're not Harborview track. The track is just the clinic, and we'll go over that more later. UWMC Northwest is one of the 2 campuses of the UW Medical Center, and it's the more community style campus. And then Montlake, which we'll talk about in a second, is the more like quaternary care where they do transplants, things like that. So UWMC Northwest is where our inpatient service is actually moving in a week. So we had been at Montlake, but we're moving to the more community style campus because it's more kind of bread and butter inpatient medicine for family medicine. They also have an amazing, really patient-centered, really non-medicalized childbirth center where we already had done a bunch of OB before, but now we'll be delivering our continuity patients too, which is really exciting. And we have other rotations at Northwest too, like cardiology and surgery. And then Montlake, like I mentioned, and that's me and Joey being silly in the ER, is the more quaternary care center. This is where we used to have our inpatient service. It's the academic medical center. It's where the medical school is. And even after we move our service, you'll still have tons of rotations here. So we do ICU, OB at UW Montlake, still dedicated OB time there. We work there in the ER a lot. So you're gonna still be there if that's kind of your vibe, the more quaternary care center. Seattle Children's is an incredible resource that we have here in Seattle. It's really a world-renowned children's hospital, and we get to work there inpatient as an intern, in the ER both as R1 and as an R2, and we do some outpatient days there too. So on certain rotations, you'll rotate there with orthopedics or dermatology. And I think all the family medicine residents from Seattle work at Children's a little bit. And even residents from other programs in the state because it's the children's hospital. But it's really nice to be so closely affiliated with them and to technically be, in the same GME as the PEDS residents there. So we're in the same union and all that kind of stuff. And then the VA. So the VA is unique everywhere. It is a very amazing and unique veteran patient population. Really great bread and butter inpatient medicine, a little bit less quaternary care than like the ICU at UW, for example. And we do tons of rotations here as well. So the Chelan track will do their ICU rotation at the VA, and then the rest of us will also do hospitalist rotations at the VA and some sprinkled in kind of outpatient stuff, including dermatology. And the dermatology pathology at the VA is really, really interesting. And then Chelan has Lake Chelan Community Hospital. which I just visited last week for the first time, which is very exciting. It is a small 25-bed rural critical access hospital. It is run by family doctors, truly. There are like 3 non-family doctors there. And it's 1 hour, a little bit less than an hour away from the nearest hospital that has more specialty care, which is Wenatchee. There's a tiny ED, you know, echo infrequently, MRI infrequently. The Chelan track residents can talk a little bit more about it, but it's a really amazing, amazing place to do rural training, if that's what you're interested in. Okay, and then a little bit more about the tracks. So like I said, the track is almost only like what clinic you're in between Harborview and Northgate. So the vast majority of your residency, whether you're Harborview or Northgate, is the same. But at Harborview Clinic, you have your clinic at a very mission-driven county hospital, safety net hospital, primarily exists to serve under-resourced patients. And so you're going to have a little bit different of a population. So it's a really diverse community, a really high percentage of patients who are recent immigrants and refugees, a really high percentage of interpreted visits. And the Harborview residents and Ying can talk a little bit more about this later as well. And still really diverse patients, so lots of geriatrics, lots of peds, lots of really repro health procedures, lots of addiction medicine, and care for people experiencing homelessness. And really just an incredible community and amazing place, and I'm sure that they will gush about it a ton later. Northgate Clinic, also an amazing place. This was my clinic and still is this year. It's a super diverse community. So Seattle is experiencing a lot of the same things that a lot of big cities are, where unfortunately a lot of people who used to live closer to the center of the city have been displaced by gentrification, by rising rents. And so a lot of actually quite under-resourced people have moved to the Northgate area. And so Northgate sees a really diverse population of a lot of much older people who've been in the area for a long time, but also a lot of newer immigrants and refugees as well. We're seeing a higher and higher percentage of interpreted visits, but still a lot less than Harborview. And we obviously take all insurances, have people who are on hospital financial assistance. I have patients who need treatment for addiction, and I do that at Northgate. We prescribe Suboxone, you know, we have patients who are homeless. And so it is a little bit less under-resourced of a population than Harborview, but still really diverse and rewarding. And at Northgate is where we have our repro clinic, where every resident will rotate, is just physically located at Northgate, where we do abortions, vasectomy, things like that. And then Northgate also has a real focus on QI and panel management, which I really love, and a really strong behavioral health integration program. Harborview has all these things too, just I worked there, so I know more about it. But yeah, we can talk more about that in a bit. And then for Chelan, like we mentioned, this is the 3rd track. So this track is a little different than the other 2 tracks because it is much more different in the R2 and R3 year because you're not living in Seattle. But you spend your 1st year in Seattle, your 2nd year and 3rd year in Chelan, critical access hospital run by family docs. The clinic is an FQHC, which has a really large proportion of Spanish-speaking patients, and the doctors in Chelan, you know, do everything. They do C-sections, appendectomies, really full spectrum family medicine. Wellness. Wellness is super important in residency. Residency is hard. You work a lot of hours, and it's really important that we, as a program, figure out ways to help you stay well throughout residency. So some of the ways we do that are by building in protected wellness time into the curriculum. So we have an annual overnight retreat for us is coming up in October, where everybody, all the residents are off, and so everybody gets to hang out together. We also have quarterly wellness activities at Didactics, which is protected time that otherwise you would be doing didactic learning. And so you don't have to like get on Zoom at a time when you otherwise would have been hanging out with your family. We have a wellness committee, wellness and resiliency committee that is made up of residents and faculty who are super committed to always asking questions and figuring out how we can do a better job with wellness. One of the things that they invented is this semi-annual photo contest that we do now twice a year, which has been super fun. It's really invigorating to see photos of everyone's lives, and some people are really good photographers. And then another really important thing to mention is just that being in a program in an environment that's so big like UW has a real advantage when it comes to wellness, because GME has their own wellness office separate from our program. And there are actually 3 therapists on staff that you can get free therapy from pretty much any time. And it's an ACGME requirement that you're allowed to leave anything, even if you're on call, to go to therapy. And so we take full advantage of that. And that's just an amazing resource that because of scale, we can have at a place as big as UW, which is awesome. And then on the side, we hang out together, we like each other. That's a huge part of wellness too. So obviously before COVID, but this is just a ton of the different stuff that we've done. So Halloween party thrown by the UWHA, or now is renamed the RFPU, the Resident Labor Union. Some sort of spur of the moment tacos, probably organized by Jose because he organizes a lot of the social stuff. A beach barbecue, Liz doing yoga, which she is amazing at, which is COVID friendly. And then we also really love pets and babies in our program. So lots of people with pets, some residents with kids, lots of faculty with kids, and everybody is just really friendly to being involved in the whole family because we're family medicine. That's a really important part of our culture. And even more pets and babies. Okay. So living in Seattle, it's incredibly beautiful. I moved here for residency. I had never left the East Coast before, and I am so glad I did because it is an amazing place to live. Residents live all over Seattle. So as you saw with our rotation sites are pretty far flung, but Seattle is a really small city. So it still doesn't take more than 15 or 20 minutes to get between any rotation sites. So depending on where your clinic is, depending on what your intern schedule looks like, or just where you want to live, you can live in a bunch of different places in Seattle. So some people live in the sort of Capitol Hill, First Hill area downtown near Harborview. Some people live up by Northgate. Some people live in between near the main Montlake Hospital and Seattle Children's and kind of the Roosevelt U District area or Green Lake. If these words mean nothing to you, that's totally fine. You will figure it out. It is a pretty small city and easy to figure out, but just know that residents kind of live all over the place and there's a lot of good options. And one of the things that's most important to figuring out where you want to live is what your commute's going to be. And so most people have a mixed commute, so that they drive some places, they bike some places, they maybe walk some places, they take the bus some places, just because there's different hospitals. Some of them have free parking, some of them don't. Some of them are right on a bus line and some of them aren't. So you probably will have a different commute, different places, but it's pretty easy to figure out. There's free parking at most of the sites, including Northwest, which is where our service is. There's free shuttles between most of the sites as well. And there's really, really good bike trails in Seattle. It's a very bike-friendly city, and this is a picture of some of those. And then we also get, the union fought for us to get a free UPass, which is the Metro Pass for the bus and the light rail in Seattle. And starting in 2021, the light rail is going to go to Northgate. And so you will be able to take the light rail for free between almost all of the sites as well, if you don't want to drive or you don't have a car. Tons of fun things to do in Seattle, slightly less now because of COVID, but luckily Seattle is a very outdoor friendly place. And so tons of stuff to do is still super safe. Let me go back. So Seattle, within the bounds of Seattle, I'm from New York, so I didn't really understand a city that has nature within it, but even within Seattle in a super short distance, you get amazing nature. So you can stand up paddleboard in the lake. You can go to like one of multiple real beaches that we have here. It's pretty amazing. And then also, of course, we have an incredible like bar scene, coffee, wine, beer, food, but hopefully that comes back. And then it's also really easy to get out of the city. So that was also something I wasn't aware of as a New Yorker, but you can really drive half an hour and you can be on a mountain. It's pretty incredible. There's ferries to the nearby islands. and lots of really great hiking, lots of great beaches and lakes and weekend getaways near Seattle. So that's the end of the first section. So please continue to put your questions in the chat. We'd love to collect questions for the Q&A, so please do put them in the chat. And then we're going to talk a little bit more now about care for under-resourced people in both the rural and urban settings at UW. And one point I want to make before I turn it over to the rest of our residents and faculty is that no matter what track you're in, you will practice rural and urban medicine for under-resourced people at UW. So the focus of this section is not like, oh, if you want to do this track. The tracks are not as relevant to this because we have so much elective time and so much of our time is already at sites that are focused on the under-resourced that I just wanted to make that point that you will do this work if you want to, and even if you don't want to at UW, no matter what. Okay, so first, what are the urban opportunities? So within both continuity clinics, there is a lot of work with under-resourced patients. And so one of the big focuses at Northgate is the integrated behavioral health that we have. So because we have integrated behavioral health and we have an addiction psychiatrist on staff at Northgate, we do a ton of medication-assisted treatment for substance use disorder, which, you know, because of correlation happens to be a lot of the time for under-resourced patients, not always, but we have a lot of opportunity for exposure to that kinds of work. We have a lot of patients on financial assistance, a lot of patients who are currently houseless, especially with telemedicine. It has actually really increased my particular reach to my patients who are maybe staying with different friends around the state, not in Seattle. And so that has been really, really interesting and wonderful to be able to reach people that way. And then we have a population of people who are refugees and immigrants, usually slightly less recently than the patients at Harborview. And then one last thing I wanted to mention is just that for me, one of my passions is repro. I'm an abortion provider, and I think that reproductive justice is a really important facet of justice in general, especially for our patients who are under-resourced. And so having the repro clinic at Northgate, where patients come from like all over to get these procedures done, is just another really unique and wonderful way that we meet patients from all over Seattle and the surrounding area. All right, does someone want to talk about a little bit more about Harborview?
I can talk about Harborview. Hi everyone, this is Claire again. I'm one of the second year residents at the Harborview site. Joey is here next to me. He's the other second year resident at the Harborview site. We love Harborview and we love our clinic, and I think everyone will tell you the same thing about it. We have a really special patient population that we take care of. We take care of a large population. I'd say almost probably the majority of our patient population has limited English proficiency. We have a large patient population that is recently came to this country, who are refugees or recent immigrants. Most of our patients are on public insurance or have no insurance and are getting hospital assistance. We take care of a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness and a lot of people with pretty complicated psychiatric comorbidities. Our clinic is located on top of Harborview Mental Health and Addiction, so we do a lot of the primary care for patients who are seen downstairs for psychiatric and addiction needs. Just like Northgate, we do a lot of reproductive health. We do a lot of buprenorphine treatment. We have a really robust buprenorphine program at Harborview. Harborview is just like a really special place. Our patients are incredible, and it's an incredibly mission-driven place. Everyone who works at Harborview, the physicians, the staff, everyone is there because they want to be there and they want to take care of the patients that we take care of. And it's just a really incredible place. It's one of the main things that drew me to this program. Joey and I both went to medical school at UW, so we had already trained there as medical students. And that was one of the big reasons that we wanted to come to this program. I'll put our emails in the chat. If you guys would like to ask us any more questions about Harborview, we'd be happy to talk to you more.
Great. And then in addition to the clinics, you know, we talked a little bit already about how many of our rotation sites are really mission driven and geared towards care for under-resourced patients already at their core. So UW is a public institution, it's a state school, and Harborview is a county hospital, as I mentioned. And then of course, also the VA has its own public mission as well. And so by doing tons of rotations at all of these different sites, you know, you're caring for some of the most vulnerable people in our city and in our, you know, 6-state area as well, on pretty much all of your rotations. So in the ER, on internal medicine teams, on OB, you're caring for very vulnerable patients. This picture is of our graduates, Viet and Dan, who is our current Global Health Fellow, when they volunteered to work in the COVID ICU at Harborview, which saw some of the sickest, most vulnerable patients from our area who had COVID. And as we all know, COVID had a horribly worse impact on people of color in our region, especially at Harborview on the Hispanic population in our area. And so we are right at the front lines of doing that really important work. And our residents, I think almost all of our third years and some of our second years worked in the COVID ICU at Harborview last year. And I think I came from a place where care was a little bit more divided, like in New York, you know, there's like the fancy NYU hospital and then there's like the public NYU hospital, and it's just not like that at all here. And I think it was hard for me to imagine that that could be true because I was coming from a place where care was so obviously divided. You know, residents took care of patients who had Medicaid and attendings didn't take Medicaid. And that is not at all what it's like here. And especially in our family medicine department, but really at the entire institution, even just in Seattle in general, care is so much more equitable. Even just the fact that at Harborview, it's all the same doctors as at UW, all the same residents. Anyway, it's hard to kind of describe if you're not from a situation like this, and it's hard to see why it's important if you are, because you didn't realize the other half of the country was the other way. But I just want you guys to know that I feel like everybody gets the same care here, no matter what their insurance status is, or ability to pay, or socioeconomic factors. And then there's other things built into the curriculum where you can do other urban underserved work. So one is the community practice rotation that I mentioned before. And so I did my community practice rotation at Neighbor Care Health, which is a CHC, which is similar to an FQHC network in Seattle. And I worked at a bunch of different of their sites and had a really great experience kind of learning about that FQHC model. You can do your community practice rotation in a rural site, which we'll talk about in a bit, but many people do stay in Seattle to do it. I also did a couple of days at the Ballard Homeless Clinic, which is an incredible place. It's based in the Nair Ernest House. You can see a picture on the bottom, which is an 80-room permanent housing complex for formerly homeless people based on the principle of housing first, and has this co-located clinic run by Neighbor Care in it. And these are just some examples of some of the work that you can do in Seattle on electives without even having to really leave the city. It's an unfortunate, of course, horrible thing that Seattle has such a huge homeless population and has decided not to just house them, which, you know, I'm sure we all agree about that being insane. But I think because of that, you know, of course, we have the opportunity to help a lot of these people. And same thing with addiction. Seattle has a huge opioid problem. And of course, I would rather that nowhere has that. But given that that is the case, we get to have the privilege of working with those people, and that we get to learn from those patients. Oh, and Dave wanted me to mention that the Ballard Homeless Clinic is run by one of our former chief residents, which is very cool. And then there's other local electives too. So middle picture is of Swedish Ballard, which is a really innovative model that I worked at for a couple days that sees only Medicaid patients in a ACO type of model. So a really quality-based model, which is really cool. A super old picture from Harborview. And this is a reminder to myself that you can work in lots of different specialty clinics at Harborview and also at the VA on your electives. And so you can get tons of experience at Harborview outside the family medicine clinic too. And then Jess is going to talk a little bit more about the refugee and immigrant health elective in a little bit. And we can also work with the medical students at the student-run free clinic. So that's also another really fun way to get involved with the community and to care for some of our most vulnerable people. Jess, did you want to talk a little bit more about immigrant and refugee health elective?
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica again. I'm one of our threes, and I worked with Dr. Zhang on a refugee and immigrant health elective last year. It is a really, really cool and multidisciplinary elective dedicated to understanding both the medical but also the social and legal context of refugee and asylee health here in Seattle. Seattle is a huge hub for refugees and asylees, and that's reflected in our patient population. What I did on the elective is I had a bunch of meetings with various resettlement advocacy and legal agencies, some of which are represented here on the slide. Unfortunately, during my time, it was affected a little bit by COVID, but in the past, residents have also gotten to work with faculty in tuberculosis clinic, Hep C clinic, HIV clinic, but I still had the opportunity to learn how to perform like a new asylee evaluation for someone who's brand new to the country, like seeking asylum. And I also met with a lot of really empowering organizations and got to help them with a lot of COVID-related translation projects. So if you're interested in refugee and immigrant health, I'd highly recommend this elective. There's tons of opportunities to create electives like this. Just because we do live in Seattle, we are part of the UW system, and we have so many resources and amazing faculty kind of right at our fingertips to help guide us to explore kind of whatever we're interested in when it comes to under-resourced populations.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything about this elective? Okay. So next we're going to talk a little bit more about the rural opportunities, and Jess is also one of our residents who has done some of the most rural work besides, of course, our Chelan residents. And so Jess and Christine, we're going to talk a little bit more about all the different rural opportunities at UW.
All right, so here is just a small collection of photos actually taken by residents on their rural rotations. So we get to visit some of the most beautiful places in the WWAMI region, which is Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, Montana, Idaho, and also outside of the region. The next slide. And so this is just a Google Maps of where the past, I would say like 5 years of residents have gone on their CPS or community practice rotations. This is not inclusive at all, but it just shows kind of the broad range of opportunities that you have at your disposal. So people have gone to various places in Alaska, people have gone to Grand Coulee, Washington, people have gone to various Indian Health Service locations, and also various places in Montana. And then we had another resident go to a small town in California, Quincy, California recently. Go to the next slide, Chloe. Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight a place that I just came back from a couple months ago. I did a rotation at Cooley Medical Center in Grand Coulee, Washington. One of our recent alumni is currently a faculty member there. It is a truly full spectrum rural hospital. Grand Coulee, Washington is northeast of Seattle. The population a couple years ago was about 1,000. There's a really large indigenous population because it's adjacent to the Colville Reservation. So a lot of our patients seek care both at the IHS site as well as in our clinic and our medical center. If you look at the picture right there, that is the Cooley Dam, which is one of the biggest dams on the Columbia River. If you look on the far end of the river, so like across the bank, that is all native land. And then Grand Coulee itself is on like the bank closer to us. And so you can see it's super close to the reservation. And we see a lot of really under-resourced patients who seek care in both places. So when I was there, I did inpatient and outpatient adult medicine. I worked in the urgent care. I was in the ED, and I also did obstetrics. I did C-sections, and I also did vaginal deliveries as well. So truly full spectrum medicine. I was pretty much on call all the time because I just wanted to see everything. And you really get to see really incredible family docs doing like amazing work there. I think Christine should talk about Chelan.
All right, hi guys. So to talk about Chelan, part of the reason why I was really interested in a rural transition of the community. So to tell you guys a little bit about Chelan, we are a town of like 4,500, about 6,000 with our neighboring town Manson year round. It's a very agricultural based community with a lot of orchards and vineyards around, which brings a large portion of our Hispanic migrant worker population as our patients. And then in the summer, there's a lot of tourism, so the population really bumps and the hospital becomes more bustling. Our primary clinic site is Columbia Valley Community Health Center, which is a federally qualified health center. And so it provides care to everyone in the region, regardless of their insurance status, their ability to pay, their background, which is really an awesome opportunity. It's also a really great clinic, similar to what Joey and Claire mentioned about the Harborview Clinic. All of our staff and all of our faculty are really, really devoted to the clinic and serving the and working with the patient population that we have. Our clinic has integrated behavioral health. It has dental right in the building. It actually has WIC, Women, Infant, and Children's, that shares our space. Right now during COVID, it's a little bit different, but that's also really great to have all of those services right in-house and to be able to wrap around our care for our patients in that way. And as Zoe mentioned earlier, and as Jessica mentioned about her experience in Cooley, we do it all. We're not just in clinic, but we're bouncing between the hospital to do admissions when we're on call. We're doing all of the OB in the hospital, and it's just been a really amazing experience to train out here. And having just been out here for 3 months, I already feel very wrapped around and encouraged by this community, and it is a fantastic place to be. I don't know if Carrie Bergeson, who's on and is our site director, wants to add anything, but also to mention Jessica Liu and a couple of our other residents have come out here, even if you're Seattle based, just for like a 2 or 4 week elective and kind of similarly get experience in the clinic, in the hospital, in OB. So it is a great site to train, even if you are a Seattle resident as well.
No, I think that was a good summary, Christine. I totally agree. I think my favorite thing and one of our biggest selling points at our program is you're going to learn rural family medicine, full scope family medicine from family physicians who believe you belong there. So when you're learning to primary a C-section or learning to do upper or lower endoscopy, or you're in the ER intubating someone or putting in the central line, the person backing you up is a family doctor who just believes at their core that you can do this and you belong there. And I think that's what makes our program so special.
That makes me so happy to hear that. That's so wonderful. I love that.
Christine, you should tell everyone about your Labor Day weekend, just to give a little snapshot.
I almost was going to say that, Jessica.
So yeah, I was on call for our Labor Day weekend, which was the end of our tourist season, really. And so town was pretty busy. I took call that weekend, Friday through Monday, and it ended up being a very busy ED shift with 2 very sick patients. And so there were central lines and intubations. And then shortly after that, we had an OB who needed to go to section, and so got involved there. It was fantastic learning. And as Dr. Bergeson mentioned, everyone around you, I was in a position where I was the learner, but I had a family doctor who's actually one of our graduates, Adam Nishimura, who works in the ED, supporting me through everything. We actually had our EMS team, which is fantastic and amazing at what they do, helping me with intubation because they do a lot of intubations in our community. So it was just this fantastic learning opportunity and a very busy weekend, but it was great.
Yay. And then lastly, just, we're in the WWAMI region. Dave, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. If all of those places that Jess and Christine highlighted aren't enough for you, this is a map of the WWAMI training sites, again, across Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, Montana, and Idaho. We have access to all of these things. And it's not to say that you couldn't get to any of these places from somewhere else in the country, but the connections that we have allow for incredible diversity of training sites that span 3 time zones and 3,000 miles and 25% of our US landmass. So it's a pretty incredible opportunity. And I'll just also say that that rotation that Jessica set up at Grand Coulee was arranged in a matter of weeks. And it's because of these connections that we have that we're able to do that sort of thing. So wherever you want to go, we can get you there.
Okay, let's do some Q&A. So if all the UW FMR people want to turn their cameras on, that way everybody can see all the different people who can answer their questions. There's always some questions that come up just about like application logistics, and just to make sure people don't feel like they necessarily have to ask those, just to kind of go over. Dave mentioned that we made a lot of efforts this year and over the past few years to really take a look at our application process and our interview process and try to remove as much bias as possible and make it as anti-racist as possible. And so one of the things about that is that we do standardized interview questions. We've been doing that for a few years, and that is evidence-based to show that it can remove bias from the interview process. And then another thing that we want you to know is that we're not screening any applications out by step 1 score. So the only screen is that you passed step 1. You don't have to have passed it on your first try. There's no punishment for trying multiple times. And with COVID and everything, we're not going to screen for anything else, any other tests for an interview, and but just for matching. So don't worry about scores. We really want to take a look at your whole application. So if you have a completed application and you pass step 1, then you're going to get a fair shake. So that always comes up a lot. So we just want to make sure that we address that right away. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'll kind of moderate the Q&A. So the first thing that came up that always comes up is that sort of how did we handle COVID question, and how is COVID affecting our residency? So elephant in the room, we don't have a slide on it on purpose, but let's talk about it first. So some of the questions were, what was our residency's response to COVID, anticipated changes in the curriculum due to COVID, and how has resident life changed because of COVID? Does anybody want to take that one first?
I can speak on it a little bit. I think,
I can talk a little bit about COVID. Oh, go ahead, Goldie. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think our family medicine residency responded so incredibly with the onset of the COVID pandemic. We were obviously, in the headlines back in March and April for being kind of the first site in America to have this issue going on. And, I feel like the faculty really stepped up and really showed support, as well as, the second and the third years. I was an intern year, so there wasn't much change for me. But, seeing the second and the third years really step up and volunteer their time in service to their communities and in service to Seattle was incredible. Like I was saying, as an intern, it didn't really affect, a lot of the rotations were inpatient rotations. So honestly, our day-to-day wasn't affected much. I think the only biggest difference was, instead of meeting for our learning periods during didactics, we kind of focus more on Zoom sessions, which kind of continues to this day. But honestly, other than not being able to see my fellow interns as often, it's been pretty seamless for me.
Yeah, I just want to add on that we're really lucky that we practice in Seattle, and there is such a strong public health focus and a strong evidence-based medicine focus. And our whole UW family has, both within and outside of the family medicine department, has done amazing work to make sure that the residents feel supported and, most importantly, safe in their daily activities. Like, we never really had issues with lack of PPE here. Like, we always are changing our guidelines kind of day by day, week by week, depending on what new evidence has come out. I was in the inpatient service when when our first COVID patient hit the UW MC, and I never felt unsafe or unprepared.
Just to add, I think the most devastating thing for me was the lack of being able to get together, the whole social distancing. It's had a pretty big effect on our residency. We're a really tight-knit group, and we do a lot of our learning in person and together at our Northgate facility. And so it's been a little bit hard, and we're basically just waiting on the state restrictions so we can come back together and start doing in-person stuff again. But other than that, I felt very supported with our residency. You heard a lot of numbers about our third years last year getting sent off to the ICU to take care of COVID patients, but that was all on a voluntary basis. Everyone had the ability to kind of say no if they didn't feel comfortable, didn't feel safe, or they had other reasons why they shouldn't be in that kind of a setting. And so just overall, COVID has made a very interesting aspect of our learning, but it's been really, really, really good for us here through family medicine, I feel like.
Thanks, Joey. I completely agree with everything everyone said. We got some questions about this sort of perennial family medicine issue of, what if I like a lot of things? Can I do all the things that I like? So one person asked about, if you want to do abortions and also MAT, can you do that? If you want to do sports, can you also do something else? Does anybody want to kind of talk about how you can do everything you want?
I can talk about that, Zoe.
Awesome.
So I think that one of the biggest, well, there are a lot of strengths about our program, but one of the biggest strengths is that you can do anything at our program. We're not a place that only attracts a certain type of person who's interested in doing a certain type of thing. Our faculty all have very different interests, and a lot of them are really experts in lots of different fields. And same with our residents. We have residents who want to do all sorts of things. So I think I really appreciate kind of working with a group of people who all have different interests than me. I think it's really good training. And it's also a nice thing because, when you come into residency, you don't necessarily know what you want to do. So I think the nice thing about our program is, if you come here, you can do literally anything. We have a lot of people that do fellowship, people that go rural, people who stay urban, people who do research, people who don't. We have tons of experts in reproductive medicine, addiction medicine, sports medicine, global health. There's just so many opportunities to do anything here.
Thanks, Claire. I completely agree. To answer some of the specific questions, so everybody does Suboxone training and can prescribe Suboxone in their clinic. So that doesn't have to be like a special separate thing you do, although you can do extra elective time in addiction medicine, of course. And then everybody does, it's opt-out for abortion training. Everybody has a repro rotation, and then you can do extra electives in that if you want. So I definitely graduated proficient in all repro procedures, including abortion, just by doing probably like less than half of my elective time in that, and do prescribe Suboxone and everything. And then somebody also specifically asked about sports. Has anybody on this call done like the extra sports stuff where you like go or be like the team doctor for high school and stuff? I don't think anybody on this call has, but just to represent that section of our residency that happens to not be here, you absolutely can do that. Tons of people do like sideline doctoring during residency. Is super fun. We're really lucky that we're at such like a well-regarded, well-connected sports program here.
Zoe, can I jump in on this one?
Oh, of course.
Awesome. So yeah, when I came in as an intern, we got an email actually before we even started asking if we wanted to get involved with like fall football and things like that. We have a very robust sports medicine program out here that is probably one of our premier things, to be honest. Another thing that was like really, really cool, we have a sports medicine fellowship here, and our sports med fellow actually just came back from the WNBA bubble. Where he worked with one of our faculty members helping to take care of WNBA players. And so that was a really neat aspect that was kind of unexpected for all of us, but that was a unforeseen benefit of the COVID.
Yeah, super cool. Does anybody want to talk about working with medical students in our residency and all the different ways we do that?
I can talk about that. I personally love working with medical students, and that's another reason why I wanted to be here at UW. We work with medical students and PA students on almost every rotation. We have them on our family medicine service. We work with them, you know, on every other rotation as well, in the emergency department, on wards, on OB, in clinic, pretty much everywhere we're with medical students. And UW is just an institution that values teaching. It's a priority in everything we do. And so it's really good for us as learners that everyone is into teaching, but it's also a really nice opportunity that there's always time and emphasis placed on us learning to be teachers and work with students. I'd say for me, the hardest part of COVID was that they pulled all of the medical students out for maybe 4 months. And that was really hard. I really missed having the medical students. And when they came back in June, it was so wonderful. We're really happy that they're back. Or I guess that you guys are back.
Yeah, having them back in clinic over the past couple of weeks has been such a phenomenal joy. Being able to just work with them and see kind of how far you guys have come along, especially the MS4s. Yeah, we integrate them into our family medicine curriculum pretty well.
Yeah. And we work with learners from all years. We'll have PA students in their first, second year. We'll have medical students coming in, preclinical. They'll be third year, you know, doing their family medicine rotations, and third years in all the other clerkships we do, and also fourth year sub-Is that come and work with us. So it's pretty broad training in their aspect and what we get to do and how we get to teach them. So it's a really unique experience to kind of like learn how to teach somebody in different stages of their career, because you can only imagine like the different things that different backgrounds and different knowledge bases that they have. It's really great.
So yeah, I think it's also important to note that on our rural rotations, whether it's here in Chelan or elsewhere in the WWAMI region, medical students are common. So like out here in Chelan, we have a full list of sub-Is this year. We have one of our faculty members who participates with med students in their first, second, and third year that come out here. And I think just unique to the WWAMI region and the medical education out here is that even if you're at different rural sites, you'll also likely have a medical student with you.
That's so awesome. I wanted to quickly answer a couple of quick ones. So one person asked, what fellowships do our residents go to? The answer is a lot. Our current Global Health Fellow and Repro and Advocacy Fellow both were graduates of our program. And then last year, we also had someone go to Geriatrics Fellowship at Swedish in Seattle. and there's one more, right? Oh yeah, another person went to Repro Fellowship. And we've had people do sports medicine at our own program and at other programs as well. Integrative medicine fellowships, tons of stuff. But less than half of people go to fellowship also, though, just because I think people want to do primary care or full spectrum family medicine, and you don't have to do a fellowship if you don't want to. And then Jess, I was hoping, I know that some of the global stuff has gotten a little bit postponed due to COVID, but we got a bunch of questions about global opportunities. And so I know that you kind of went through the process of trying to set that stuff up. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so first off, I'll say a pro about our program. I've had a lot of my electives canceled because of COVID. I'm really interested in global health and rural underserved or under-resourced medicine. And a lot of it got canceled, unfortunately, because of COVID and international travel restrictions. But our program was so supportive and able to come up with alternatives very, very quickly. And everyone really extended their arm, they really welcomed me with open arms. And it was really great to be able to still get the rural experiences that I was hoping for, but just in a little bit of a creative way. So I was supposed to go to Naivasha, Kenya last March. Actually, I was supposed to leave maybe 2 weeks after COVID first hit our hospitals. And so that got canceled. But we usually, for international rotations, the sooner you want to set it up, the better. So we have to have an active PLA with international sites, which I forget what PLA stands for. Does Zoe, can you?
Program letter of agreement. But
Yeah,
there's a bunch that are
already
set up, Kenya and a few other ones, yeah.
Yeah, some are already set up. So I was supposed to go to Kenya, and that was already set up through the internal medicine program. But usually the earlier that you can arrange it, the better. One of our faculty members, Chris Sanford, is nationally renowned in travel medicine and disaster medicine. And he is kind of your go-to person if you're interested in different global health opportunities. He has connections all over the world. And oftentimes these sites already have active PLAs. And if they don't, our team residency is really on the ball at setting up all of these international electives. Hopefully we'll still have them back. I think someone asked about opportunities to do multiple electives. And certainly that's possible. I think you just have to make sure you get your clinic numbers because we do have a required number of clinic visits that you have to meet before graduation.
Thank you so much. We got a bunch of questions about OB experience at our program. So specifically, do we get surgical OB experience? And how many deliveries should we expect, and how many months of OB training do we do? So Dave, did you maybe want to address that question? And maybe Carrie could too, about the Chelan specific too.
Yeah, so I'm going to start by saying that if you want to come out of this program doing OB, you can come out of this program doing OB. Everybody's experience is a little bit different. And somebody asked about numbers, and our numbers are not as high as some places that you will go. I would say that our residents usually are somewhere between 30 and 60 deliveries over the course of their 3 years. If they just kind of follow the regular curriculum, there are opportunities to do more. But I think the experience is a quality experience. So this is not a residency where you are going to swoop in and catch the baby, smile, and head on out and catch the next one. This is a residency where you will follow somebody through labor, work with them through their labor management, deliver their baby, take care of the baby afterwards. I think it's a high quality experience, even though the numbers may be a little bit less than at other programs. Our first year OB is done at the Montlake UW Medical Center. It's a very high risk place. Generally come out of that experience with a very good understanding of preeclampsia and gestational diabetes and some of these sorts of things. And then our second year OB is done in a more community setting at Northwest Hospital, and just recently we've been doing some work at Swedish, and our RTT residents go to Auburn actually at the end of their first year. So a lot of variety there. That is, we work with midwives in those settings, and more of a community experience. So high risk in the first year, maybe a little bit lower risk in the second year, and then of course all the third year electives that Zoe talked about earlier. But I would love to have one of the residents comment on what their OB experiences have been.
Yeah, I can chime in a little on this. So I'm a person very much wanting to do full spectrum, you know, gauging the like opposed versus unopposed programs. I know I had some worries, you know, doing my interview spiel about the numbers and such, but I feel like my experience with OB, like Dr. Evans said, we do our first intern rotation over at the Montline campus. And although, you know, we don't catch a lot of the babies there, I mean, the numbers aren't like, you're not catching like 20 an hour kind of place, but you are managing high risk patients. And, you know, depending on where you want to end up practicing, and if you do want to go into OB, like I do, you know, going into underserved populations, you're not really going to be, you know, you are going to be likely handling more high risk populations, folks with hypertension, folks with gestational diabetes. So I felt like my experience with the labor management portion of it, working with MFMs, working with these OB folks who do really let us feel like a part of the team there, was pretty phenomenal. So I really enjoy my OB experience here. You know, the worry about the opposed versus the unopposed, I think the University of Washington in general really works well to incorporate us onto the non-service, and I feel like OB is included in that for the most part.
And I'll just add, if I could, that you know, one of the questions that you should ask if you're interested in OB is how many graduates go on and do OB, and that's a pretty good measure of what kind of obstetrical training you'll get. And in our program, it's around a third. I will say that the class that graduated 2 years ago, all of them did OB. All of them went on to do OB. That doesn't happen very often, but I like to say that it did. The class that just graduated is probably closer to 20%. So it really, it's variable, but again, for those who want to do OB, you can.
Thanks, everyone. Let's see. One person asked, do we work at nursing homes and do home visits? Yes, we do. One of our APDs is actually a geriatrician, and we do a ton of work at a local nursing home with her on multiple different rotations and longitudinally, and we have longitudinal nursing home patients. And then we are required to do a few home visits, and we have time to do that during the curriculum too. And I think we're just about wrapping up. But one person asked, let's do two more. So one was about research, which we haven't talked that much about. So if anybody wants to talk about their experience doing scholarly work, or in particular, the person asked specifically about research during residency, I can talk, but if someone else wants to, that'd be great too. I can talk a little bit about it. So we are actually starting a new research track. So outside of the research track, you have protected scholarly work time, and you also can use your elective time to do scholarly work. Scholarly work at our residency has meant a lot of different things. Some people absolutely do research, often with faculty who are in our research section who are super accessible and easy to link up with, but not always. Our core faculty also do research. We always have a strong contingent presenting at STFM and NAPCREG, things like that. You know, it's hard to integrate any sort of extracurricular stuff into residency, but you can absolutely do it. There is protected time. And then scholarly work can also be things like advocacy, which is a big part of our program, writing op-eds, which is not research, but is helping educate people in a different way, presenting at conferences, doing QI projects is obviously a requirement for all residencies, but is a really emphasized thing at our program as well. So I've done medical education research predominantly instead of like hard basic science research, but Nikki, who was our chief resident last year and is a current faculty, is starting this research track, and she is a great mentor for people who want to do more hard science type of research. She has a PhD and has a lot of experience doing research, so tons of options. Anyone else want to talk about that at all, or we can move on?
I'll just add that I think one of the benefits of being at an institution like UW is that whatever obscure thing you're interested in, like there is probably a faculty member in our department or in some other department who has a research interest in that and most likely has funding and resources to help you get involved. I do addiction medicine research, and some of my mentors are in the internal medicine department. And I just think that's a benefit of being at such a big institution, that you just have so many resources and you can really do whatever you want in terms of research, and everyone is very willing to help you and support you.
Yay. The last thing I just wanted to ask, which was a common theme among questions, was talking about kind of the relationships among residents, between residents and faculty, the relationships between residents in our program and relationships to other programs, and how that really feeds into the wellness component of our residency. So if anybody wants to chat about that as our last question.
I could chime in on this one. So as a family medicine resident, I feel so supported by our family medicine faculty. Whether I'm in clinic, I'll be like being real dumb and I'll be like, I need to help on this patient, give me some answers. And they will not just tell me an answer, but like actually teach me what I'm supposed to know, which is absolutely incredible. Working with all of the other different faculty within the University of Washington, whether that's OB, internal medicine, whatever it might be, emergency department, I feel very supported. They are very eager to teach us, and I feel very welcome working with those different specialties. And then in addition to that, like it's, you know, I just like the program, and I can ramble for hours. So I'm going to stop, let somebody else talk.
Can I continue that? So we, like, our residency class is super close. We hang out and we talk all the time. We're also super close with our faculty. Like Joey and I are texting Dave and Ying all the time about things medicine related and not medicine related. And it's just like we have it's a casual kind of thing. It's not a formal thing. Like we totally feel comfortable reaching out to anyone, like kind of at any hour of the day about anything, and always get a really good response. I think a lot of people have concerns about, you know, working on off-service rotations, and I think that's actually one of the best parts of our program. I know I've said that like 3 times, but you know, here in Seattle, like people really respect family medicine, and at UW, people really respect family medicine. Like when we're on ED, like the ED attendings are always telling us, "Oh my gosh, we love you guys so much. You know so much. You work so hard." On off-service rotations, we're treated just like the other residents. We're really not treated any differently. And I think that's something that people worry about a lot, but I just want to assure you guys that we are treated just like other residents, even when we're off service. And I think we get really, really good learning by being on those off-service rotations and learning from like the incredible faculty in all the other departments.
And I'll just add to that, that I think at some programs, maybe the family medicine residents would be the only off-service residents because there's only like maybe 5 residency programs. But because we have so many, you know, when we're in the ER or on a PEDS inpatient team or on an IM inpatient team, there are also anesthesia residents and psych residents and prelim residents and transitional year residents. And so, you are nowhere near the only off-service. It's actually mostly off-service, especially in the ER. And your skill set is sometimes, it's usually actually one of the closest to the core residency that you're joining. And so you are very much valued in the ER. You know, you've done more pelvic exams than anyone else. You see kids a lot too, whereas a lot of other residents don't. So yeah, it's definitely not at all like us versus them or that we're the odd ones out at all.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite experiences talking about that is on my PEDS rotation recently, PDD, having the fellow and the attending being very grateful that I was there because we were having a string of adolescents coming in and just being able to talk with them in that setting where a lot of the PEDS residents aren't, as comfortable with that of that patient population was super fun.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. Thank you to everyone from UW FMR for joining on a Saturday and all of the potential applicants for joining as well. We recorded this session, so we'll figure out a way to post it. We have one more session coming up in a couple weeks focusing on kind of specialty areas like repro and sports and all the different kinds of AOCs and stuff like that. So please feel free to join us for that too. Any other last words from anyone? No? Okay, great. Well, enjoy your
Thanks,
Saturday.
everybody. Have a great afternoon. Let us know if you have questions.
Thank you. Bye.